Alexander the Great. I mean, the name itself just says it all, right? He's a legend, synonymous with conquest, with genius, with empire. In just over a decade, he completely redrew the map of the known world with a force that seemed, well, unstoppable. But his story? It holds a massive paradox. So how on earth did the greatest conqueror in history build an empire that couldn't even outlive him? Let's get into it.
I mean, just think about the sheer scale of his success for a second. The man never lost a single battle. Not one. From Greece all the way to India, he forged this massive empire covering more than 22 million square miles. It was a feat of military brilliance that has honestly rarely been matched. He was, literally, on top of the world, a legend in his own lifetime.
And that brings us to the central mystery here. How could an empire that vast, conquered by a leader that brilliant, just crumble the second he was gone? Well, to understand the failure, first, you gotta understand the success.
Alexander was, you could say, groomed for greatness from the moment he was born. As the son of King Philip II of Macedon, the expectation wasn't just that he would rule, but that he would totally dominate. Even his own father, who was a pretty fearsome conqueror himself, saw this coming. This wasn't just a proud dad talking, it was basically a prophecy. Philip knew that the kingdom he'd built would just be a launching pad for his son's world-changing ambition.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. How did he actually do it? Well, his genius wasn't just about tactics on the battlefield. His secret weapon was logistics. While his enemies were bogged down with slow oxen and clunky supply wagons, Alexander's army was a lightning-fast machine. He used a coastal fleet for rapid resupply and swapped out slow animals for faster horses and camels. The result? Unbelievable speed and mobility, which let him hit his enemies before they even knew what was happening.
And he backed up that logistical edge with some serious tactical innovation. He took the deadly Macedonian phalanx, that wall of spears he inherited from his dad, and basically turned it up to 11. He poured resources into reconnaissance to know his enemy inside and out, and, this is crucial, he led from the front. This guy wasn't some general sitting in a tent miles away. He fought with his men, he bled with his men, and because of that, he earned their absolute, unwavering loyalty.
So the result of all this was just an unprecedented whirlwind of conquest. We're talking 20,000 miles in 12 years, and an empire stretching from the Ionian Sea to the Himalayas. He had done the impossible. But, and this is a big but, what he built so incredibly fast was about to come crashing down even faster.
Right, so this incredible story takes a really sharp, sudden turn. At the absolute peak of his power, Alexander returns to Babylon. He's planning his next big campaign, the conquest of Arabia. But that campaign, it was never gonna happen. In 323 BC, after coming down with a sudden fever, Alexander the Great was dead. Just like that. The force of nature that had held the whole world together was just gone.
His death created the single largest power vacuum in history. I mean, think about it. He had a half-brother who was considered unfit to rule, and his son hadn't even been born yet. With no clear plan, no designated successor, his entire world was suddenly up for grabs.
And the ones who did the grabbing were his own generals, his closest friends and commanders. History knows them as the Diadochi. The word Diadochi literally means successors in Greek. But let's be real, they weren't successors in any orderly kind of way. They were rivals, vicious rivals. All those bonds of loyalty that held them together under Alexander, they dissolved overnight. Their ambition, which was once a tool for the empire, now became the weapon of its destruction.
And the collapse was just astonishingly fast. The same year Alexander died, his generals were already carving up the empire for themselves in what they called departition of Babylon. But this wasn't some peaceful retirement plan, it was them drawing battle lines. Within a year, the first war of the successors kicked off, plunging the world into 2 decades of absolutely brutal conflict.
By the time the wars were over, Alexander's unified empire was a distant memory. In its place were all these warring Hellenistic kingdoms, each one founded by one of his generals. Ptolemy took Egypt, founding a dynasty that would last for 300 years. Seleucus grabbed the vast Persian heartland. The dream of a united world was dead, replaced by a legacy of non-stop conflict. So why was this collapse so total, so inevitable? Well, the seeds of the empire's destruction weren't sown after Alexander's death, they were planted by Alexander himself during his own life. We have to look past the legend to find the fatal flaws.
And here we are, at the core paradox of his legacy. The exact same qualities that made him an unstoppable conqueror, his relentless forward drive, his singular focus on victory, his larger-than-life personality, all of those things made him a terrible empire builder. He was wired for conquest, not for governance.
And you can really boil it down to 3 fatal mistakes, or maybe omissions, that doomed his empire. First, he never stopped to actually consolidate what he had won. His eyes were always on the next horizon, which left a huge territory held together by pretty much nothing but his reputation. Second, he flat out refused to plan for succession. He was so consumed by his own legend that he simply couldn't imagine a world that didn't revolve around him. And third, he failed to build institutions. The empire ran on one thing and one thing only: Alexander's personal authority. There were no senates, no councils, no systems that could function without him.
In a way, his own incredible success became his undoing. This quote from INSEAD really hits the nail on the head. Unchecked power led to hubris. He was surrounded by generals who were too afraid to question him, and he just lost touch with reality. He started to believe in his own divinity, and a god, of course, doesn't need a succession plan.
So what's his ultimate legacy? Chaos or something more? The truth is, Alexander left behind 2 empires. One of them crumbled into dust, while the other one changed the world forever.
His physical empire, the one built on personal ambition, collapsed the second he died, leaving a legacy of war. But his cultural empire, the spread of Greek language, philosophy, and art all across the East, that endured for centuries. This Hellenistic world, this fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures, it laid the groundwork for the Roman Empire and, ultimately, for Western civilization as we know it.
And that is the ultimate answer to the paradox. The maps he redrew with his armies, they were temporary. But the cultural connections he forged, the cities he founded, like Alexandria in Egypt, and the ideas he spread, that became his true, indestructible legacy.
Which leaves us with a final, fascinating question about what true greatness really is. Alexander built something magnificent, but it was so dependent on him that it was doomed to fail. It forces us to ask, what's the real measure of leadership? The spectacular achievements of a single life, or the legacy that endures long after you're gone?